What new defensive scheme changes can we expect from new Falcons head coach Raheem Morris and DC Jimmy Lake?
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. the Iron that Sharpens the Iron, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Falcons for too many years. Formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this podcast, which means you listen to this illustrious pod as your first listen each and every day, or your first watch each and every day, and to become an everydayer. All you have to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, I am joined by Cody Alexander of matchquarters.com, and he's going to talk all about this defensive scheme under Raheem Morris and Jimmy Lake and how it can potentially elevate some of the young guys. You know, can Grady Jarrett be our sort of Aaron Donald? What are some of the schematic things that Raheem Morris is going to do differently than his Falcon predecessors? And sort of if Jimmy Lake's going to add some new wrinkles to the sort of traditional Raheem Morris scheme that we've seen in LA the last couple of years. And so without further ado, let's jump into that conversation with Cody Alexander of Match Quarters right now. Welcome, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, where we are joined, of course, by an illustrious guest. He is Cody Alexander of Match Quarters. I'm sure you guys have seen some of his stuff on Raheem Morris and the Rams defensive scheme in the recent weeks and months as sort of a primer for what some of the defensive changes may be under Raheem Morris, as well as defensive coordinator Jimmy Lake. And Cody's going to come on and share some of his insight into those things. But Cody, my friend, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Now, Cody, I sort of go into this thing with a little bit of a bias, right? I've been a little disappointed by the Falcons' lack of investment in this pass rush this offseason. They've certainly added some young talent in the draft. And, I tend to think that that's a bet that will pay off years down the road. But I'm hoping maybe we can come away from this conversation feeling a little bit better about the Falcons' defensive coaching staff's ability to maybe scheme up some pass rush. But I'm curious to sort of start things off, having seen sort of some of the things that Ryan Nielsen was doing last year as the Falcons defensive coordinator. What are some of the changes that you're expecting under Raheem Morris as well as Jimmy Lake this year in 2024?
Yeah, I really think even going back to P's, you're going to have a transition away from the 4-down front. This is going to be an odd front defense. You're going to see a lot of 5-man fronts, 2 edges that are going to be pass rush. Those are going to be the guys that you're going to see them dropping into coverage, doing some things like that. This is not going to be a cover 1 in a quarters defense like you saw with Nielsen. This is not going to be a simulated pressure heavy defense under P's, which essentially is just replacement pressure. So we're sending a linebacker from one side, you're dropping an edge on the other, you're running multiple coverages on the back end. This is a system that really wants to play within the cover 3 universe. But they want to do it from a 2-high shell. I think that's the one thing that Morris took from Staley, which is Fangio adjacent, is that we're going to run things from a 2-high shell. You can even watch with the Panthers, who are also in the South, what Evero has done when he was with the Broncos, and then what the Panthers are. Watching that defense, it should be like almost looking in a mirror for the Falcons. So if you want to watch somebody and say, okay, what will we look like? I would watch the Panthers.
Okay, I think that's fair. So when you talk about sort of playing that 2-high from a cover 3 shell, what exactly does that mean? Because it feels like, from my perspective, a lot of talk has been made in recent years about people moving from sort of that Seahawks style defense, which is a lot of sort of middle of the field close cover 3 stuff, to the Staley Fangio stuff, which is those sort of split safeties, middle of the field open stuff. So how is Raheem seemingly blending those two sort of divergent philosophies.
Yeah, so Morris is actually from kind of that Carroll tree. I mean, he did work for Dan Quinn. He's a cover 3 guy at heart. I think if you go and you look at who's running the highest volume of cover 3 outside of guys like Gus Bradley at the Colts, it's going to be this kind of Morris tree that has kind of sectioned off of the Fangio scheme. Now, the one misnomer about the Fangio scheme is that it is a split field defense, and it really is not. You have 2 high safeties, but that doesn't mean that you're running, cover 2 or quarters at volume. The one team that's really doing that is the Chiefs. The Chiefs are a split field safety defense that also then is going to run at volume. We're talking like around 60% of the time or more, actually going to run split field safety looks. Morris really wants to run cover 3. The reason why you run it from a 2 high shell is leverage. Right? What's the one thing that's going to get cover 3 that history has proved that no matter what, it doesn't matter. Even the Legion of Boom struggled with this, and that is deep crossing routes, right? You can run a guy deep cross in between your linebackers and in between your post safety, and that just is going to be there. So how do you mitigate that risk as a cover 3 based defense? You do that with a split safety structure. Now we're dropping the safety from the table or high and not necessarily just lining him up low and hoping he can work high. I'm a DB guy. I played DB my entire life. It's always easier to play down than it is to play back. And so that's taking that philosophy and kind of mitigating the risk that you get from a cover 3 defense.
Okay, that definitely makes some sense, and hopefully that makes some sense to listeners that are, like what's this, all that stuff. We'll see if we can.
You're working down instead of working back, and then when you're already down, it's a lot easier to get the eye candy of the play action. And a lot of this really does have to go back to play action passing. Passing, we know analytically, is much more efficient than running the ball. Early down passing, so first and second down passing, has just exploded through the league in the past 5 years. Play action is a big part of that. You want that quarterback to have to recalibrate his brain after he's turned his back to the defense off of that. And so it's creating hesitation, it's creating doubt, but we're also using leverage to our advantage, playing from high instead of playing from low.
Okay. So I want to continue this conversation here, Cody, talking a little bit about Jimmy Lake and sort of his input and impact on this defense, knowing that he'll be, specifically calling the defense. And I want to pick your brain on what that might look like as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Now, guys, Game Time is making getting NBA Finals tickets faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to tip off. And the idea of buying NBA Finals tickets can seem daunting and a little bit of expensive, but, Game Time is taking the guesswork out of buying tickets with their last-minute deals that can save up to 60% off buying last-minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, music, theater, whatever event you're looking for near you. Their lowest price guarantee means Game Time's going to credit you 110% the difference if you can find cheaper tickets, and their flash deals allow you to save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of the game. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Game Time by downloading the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So we're talking about Raheem Morris' scheme, and that will be the bulk of our conversation. But obviously, the specific person who's going to be calling this defense is Jimmy Lake, who had a lot of success at the University of Washington at the collegiate level. This will be his first time calling defenses at the NFL level. And I'm just curious, based off of whatever your familiarity with Jimmy Lake, how do you sort of expect things to maybe be subtly different from exactly how Raheem Morris called things with the Rams the last 3 years?
Yeah, I really don't think it's going to be very much different. I think that maybe you'll see a little bit more of a nickel package, more of a 4-down package with 2 edge rushers out there. You're taking out your nose and you're basically putting 2-3 techniques in there, so you get more of kind of a pass rush influence. But he's a cover 3 guy. He was a cover 3 guy even at Washington. I think that he meshes really well with Morris and what Morris wants philosophically. I did a piece way back on him when he was the defensive coordinator at Washington about how they did, how they defended Leach in the air raid at Washington State. And they had, outside of the very first year that Leach was there, they've had tremendous success against it. Now, Washington should beat Wazoo. They have better players, all that stuff. But, you really go back and you break it down, that offense really struggled with it. And he laid the foundation really for how teams interacted with him when he moved to Mississippi State and SEC. So Lake has that college experience of going up against, coming some of these spread like offenses, primarily, going up against Washington State every year in the Apple Cup. I do think you're going to still see a cover 3 based defense. I think you're going to see a lot of the same things that you saw at the Rams. I don't think that it's going to be a huge departure, other than maybe just 1 or 2 things that maybe he likes to do a little bit more than what Morris did.
Okay, so talking about some of the things that Morris did at the Rams, we've talked a little bit about some of their coverage shells. What are some of the other hallmarks that Falcon fans can be on the lookout for as they watch this defense this season?
Yeah, I think the front structures are going to be what's really interesting. Now, he does come from the Carroll tree. They like to run a lot of underfront stuff. So what does underfront mean? It just means you're going to have a 3 technique, which is typically the strength of a 4-down defense. You're going to have that set away from either the passing strength or a tight end, just depending on how it's set up. He likes to run a lot of shade nose. So we're not going to, this isn't the tight front. I know that if you've been around, defense at all, you've heard about the tight front, clogging the B gap, 0 nose, basically a nose is set up on top of the center. You're going to get more of an eagle front, meaning that you're going to get more shades. You're not going to necessarily get just these, we're going to knock back the offensive linemen and kind of lag front, kind of knock back and fall into our gap. I know a term that's been used a lot in the system is gap and a half, meaning that I'm going to put my face in my primary gap, which is a shade I'm in, but I can always cross face if the ball hits behind me. Those are going to be hallmarks of that up front. I think the coverage pieces, this is going to be a defense that is based in cover 3, but they're going to do it from a 2 high shell. He did play more quarters in that last year at the Rams. I think that was a little bit more of personnel than it was necessary philosophy, but I will be interested to see if that carries over. I don't think it necessarily will, just because of it. If you traditionally have watched Morris, he's a big cover 3 guy, and quarters just isn't part of that universe. Those would be the hallmarks that I would look for. It's not going to be pressure heavy. We're not going to be running a lot of pressures. We're going to be running more line stunts up front, more ways of getting guys, coverage based instead of pressure based.
Okay. Now, when you talk about, some of the adjustments he made personnel wise, people like myself often will look at a previous coordinator's defense and we'll say, okay, well, you're going to be the Aaron Donald in this defense and you're going to be the Ernest Jones in this defense. Do you see some of those same parallels in terms of the ways that certain players were used in LA and sort of things that can be sort of a one-to-one, transformation here in Atlanta?
I do think the linebackers in Atlanta are a little bit underrated. I do think Caden Ellis is pretty good. I think Nate Landman had a great season last year. Where you obviously have, 3 guys that can play those 2 spots. I think that you're going to find guys that are going to compete. The linebackers, I think, are going to be very comparable to what you saw with the Rams. Now, Jones just had a tremendous year last year. They really used him as a blitzer. He was great in coverage. That translation over in a first year, we'll have to see. But you do want a linebacker that is multiple. He does a really good job. He is, and Raheem Morris does a really good job of keeping those guys clean as possible, especially in those 5-man fronts where there's really just the A gap is open, and using the defensive line to plug them in. To me, that's going to be they're the key cog in all of this, and being able to be serviceable in that middle part. And when you get a guy that can be like that at linebacker, I think that you can really kind of tie everything together a lot better.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, one thing that I've talked about a lot on this podcast and Falcon fans have experienced this when they've sort of taken players from the Rams. They did it a couple of years ago with Dante Fowler. We call it the Aaron Donald effect, where Aaron Donald is basically such a, the black hole for defense, where it's just like you have to pay so much attention to him. It allows these sort of one-on-ones for everybody else. And we've seen, whether it's Dante Fowler, Leonard Floyd, you can look at Michael Hoyt and Byron Young last year. It seems like these one-on-one opportunities that so many of these players get, is boosted by the sort of Aaron Donald effect. And I'm just curious, sort of talking about that and some of the ways that he was able to use Aaron Donald. Do you sort of look at parallels between Aaron Donald and Grady Jarrett in terms of, if I move Aaron Donald here, I know like they're going to have to slide their protection to that side of the field, and that's going to allow sort of, mismatches for some of my other players. How can a defense replicate that style of defense without necessarily having an Aaron Donald level player?
Yeah, and I think part of the problem with like Grady Jarrett, if you look at last year, production just really wasn't there. But you talk to people around the league, people know Grady Jarrett is a good player. It's just getting that when you don't have any edge rush presence and when you don't have to worry about the edge rush, we can put one-on-one with the tackle. Then a guy inside, especially primarily in a 4-down front, we can double team that guy. So I think that's a lot of the issues. I think what you're going to see now is, and what they did with the Rams is they moved Aaron Donald around as a chess piece, right? Where's the donkey? I call it, where's the donkey? Where's the one guy that we know, if I can get this guy on a one-on-one inside, I know we're going to win. And that's what they would do with Aaron Donald. I mean, maybe it's a rookie right tackle or a rookie left tackle. Let's put Aaron Donald on him. So he would move out to a 5 technique. Now he's playing on a tackle. I think that's where you can get the manipulation piece. It wasn't at the Rams. They used him as a chess piece. And so I think when you come to Atlanta, you got to use Grady Jarrett almost as like a chess piece. Like how can we get him in a one-on-one situation? Or how can we amplify our edge presence by using him to create a double team? To me, that's where you're going to see kind of that chess piece for he's going to have to figure the front out. And I don't think that blitzing is going to necessarily make it any better. Like, because you did that with Pease before. Nelson is kind of a 5-man pressure cover one guy. You have cover ones, defensive backs. It didn't necessarily translate into a lot of success or a lot of pressure, a high pressure rate. Like you said at the very beginning of this, they really didn't add anything free agent wise in terms of edge. So hopefully some of these young guys can come on and really, press the guys that are starting to kind of be a little bit more productive in that area.
So we have more to talk with Cody Alexander about some of these young guys and the ways that, this new defensive scheme can potentially maximize them. And we'll get into that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. But guys, it is winner take all time in the NBA and NHL due to playoff time, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more, whether it's NBA, NHL, MLB, upcoming NFL bets for the Falcons over under win total of 9.5. You want to bet on, one of these rookies being an offensive or defensive rookie of the year. You want to bet on player specials. How many yards is Kirk Cousins going to have? How many touchdowns is he going to throw for? You can bet on how many touchdowns and yards Bijan and Drake and Kyle Pitts all can have this year. All the action you could possibly want is available at FanDuel. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. We saw the Rams have a lot of success with some young players the last couple of years, sort of being able to put those guys in a position to succeed, playing that sort of bend but don't break style of defense. And that was very complementary to the offensive success the Rams had, especially last year, not so much the previous year. I'm curious, are we going to see similar sort of a bend but don't break style of defense here in Atlanta? Is that just sort of a hallmark of sort of what Raheem likes to do? And also, I'm curious, how do you think he and this coaching staff is going to be able to put some of these young players in a position of success like he did with the Rams?
Well, I think for the edge guys, having the ability to drop into coverage and kind of alleviating some of the issues that you have in the secondary. If you look at what they were trying to do last year, that's why I said it with the quarters, they're dropping a 310-pound defensive end and hoist into coverage. Why are they doing that? Because a lot of people are like, this is stupid. Why are we doing this? But this covers up the low area of the field so these guys can play a little bit deeper. I don't think that the Atlanta on the outside is necessarily in dire straits as the Rams are. I mean, if you go look at the Rams right now, they completely reshuffled their entire secondary. It's all, they brought Darius Williams back. They kind of they're getting new corners. Got another safety. So to me, I think that the pieces are here. I think Jesse Bates is by far one of the best safeties in the NFL, hands down, period. I think he's really good. I think AJ Terrell is good in man, has struggles in zone. So, playing a little, maybe let him play a little bit more of a boundary corner. I think Clark Phillips is a guy that can move inside, outside, along with D. Alford, who you guys, you have pieces there. They just need to have production. And a lot of that comes from the fact that you've been a 4-down team that hasn't got any pass rush. And if you're a 4-down team, you don't have any pass rush, it's going to be you're going to struggle in the back end. You can have the best secondary in the world, but the quarterback is playing 7-on-7 and he's just patting the ball back there. It's just not going to happen. So I think, to me, looking at this, he's got to find ways to manufacture pressure, come up with ways of moving. And maybe it is moving guys around to different spots. He's shown that he's been willing to do that. But he also understands, too, of when you get a guy that can cook a little bit, I'm going to let him go. We're going to use him as kind of the edge that I'm going to use. And then the other guy, we can kind of use him as I call it a grab me player. I can grab anything out of the back end so that we can allow guys to just really get vertical. If you really look at it game plan wise, he's shown an affinity to have success within this division. They used Aaron Donald last year to set the protections for the Saints and then just set a linebacker on top of Kamara, essentially eliminating him from the passing tree. And so he has different ways in his toolbox to do things and eliminate guys like that aren't necessarily blitz centric, or, a lot of times when you want to create pressure, a lot of the fans are like, well, just blitz, but not everything. Just because you get a hammer doesn't mean everything's a nail. Right. So there's reasons why they're doing things the way they are. I like what Raheem Morris's philosophy is in terms of not doing that. You want to be careful in the NFL of being very blitz centric. The teams that are very blitz centric struggle. I mean, Wink Martindale has found that out really since, the COVID season. He struggled through because he's hey, we're just going to nail home everything. So that's what I'm kind of looking for. Is how can we move pieces around? And you're playing chess and not checkers when you're talking with Morris.
Okay. Well, Cody, you answered a lot of my questions. Are there any other insights that you want to share with the listeners before we duck out of here?
Yeah, if you're really interested in the system, I wrote kind of a three-tiered primer on this defense. It's at matchquarters.com. You can go to the archive, just type in Morris or Rams, and you can find it. I've got tons of stuff on the Fangio system. This has been one of the things. I'm actually like a de facto Rams fan just because of Morris. So now I'm officially a Falcons fan. So he's one of my favorite guys to study. I think he does a really good job of the nuance of the game. So I think as a fan, you may not see, like, it's the subtleties of football that you're going to see that's going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be, we're running this covers and nobody else runs. It's not like we're going to be the Vikings and we're just going to send 5-6 every single play and play hot quarters behind it. Like, that's not going to happen. It's the nuances of the game. I think he's really smart. I'm glad he's getting another opportunity to be head coach, and he's landed in a good spot.
Absolutely. So as you guys can tell, with Cody just plugging it, go check out his stuff at matchquarters.com. Great insight into what the Rams have done the last couple of years, and we'll see what sort of things Raheem Morris is able to bridge over here to Atlanta alongside Jimmy Lake. And obviously we're looking forward to what this defense can look like under this new scheme. But Cody, I really appreciate you joining me, adding your insight, sort of, trying to condense a lot of information into a 20-minute conversation. And I think you did an excellent job. And maybe this is not the last time we'll see you on the podcast, because I feel like we'll have a lot more things to discuss as we get a little bit closer to the season. But I really appreciate you joining me on today's episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Anytime I can talk about Coach Morris, I'm all for it.
Okay. So, guys, that's going to do it for us. Thank Cody Alexander. Go check out his stuff at matchquarters.com if you want to get more insight into his defensive knowledge, extensive defensive knowledge. And for those of you that didn't quite catch it earlier, as Cody tried to explain, when he's talking about sort of playing cover three from a too high, it's kind of the pre-snap, post-snap, presentation in disguise, right? You sort of present pre-snap two high safeties, and then you sort of post that, rotate, disguise, whatever you want to call it, to more cover three looks. And that's essentially, so hopefully you guys understand what he's talking about. And I myself am hoping to dig into the Rams defensive film probably towards the end of June and beginning of July. And hopefully we'll have Cody back on then to get more into the nitty gritty specifics of the defensive scheme rather than this general overview that we tried to touch upon on this episode, in part due to, it's going to take me still probably another month to get through this rookie draft class at that point in time. But if you want to get more insights into that rookie draft class ahead of time, by all means, become a Locked On Falcons Insider. I'm sure I'll be doing some video breakdowns and film breakdowns, later this summer on the Rams defense and whatnot. And if you want to become a Locked On Falcons Insider, just hit the link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. It is a 14-day free trial, $4.99 a month. Thereafter, you'll immediately get access to whatever my upcoming film breakdowns for the next 2 weeks for free. You'll also have the access to roughly 15 that I've done already this offseason about various draft picks and various Falcon free agent pickups, as well as access to the extended all 22 reviews if you want to go back and take a look at Ryan Nielsen's defense. If you want to do that, it's all available at that link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons. Not only do you get access to all my film breakdowns, but you get that one-on-one connection. You get priority for upcoming mailbags, and we'll probably have upcoming mailbag later this week. But tomorrow's episode, I believe, will be joined by Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings. We're talking about Raheem's defensive scheme. We'll kind of talk about Zach Robinson's offensive scheme, sort of picking Luke Braun's brain on some of the things that Kevin O'Connell did, coming from that Rams McVay offense in Minnesota, as well as get Luke's thoughts on Michael Penix's mechanics and the ways that he can improve in that arena. And we'll probably talk about Kirk Cousins, and maybe JJ McCarthy as well on that episode. So that's what you can look forward to on tomorrow's episode as your first listen. Hit that link in the description below at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnFalcons in order to become a Locked On Falcons Insider. Make sure you check out, as your second listen, Locked On Sports Atlanta, Locked On Sports Today, Locked On NFL, Locked On Vikings, whatever you're into, Locked On Hawks, Locked On Braves, Locked On Bulldogs, all those shows. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.